working with Graham, and I'm head of music at St Margaret Ward in Stoke-on-Trent.
That's lovely. Thanks, everyone. Great to have so many people on the call. We'll be here, or we'll use the full hour if we try and do a roundup of absolutely everyone. So we'll leave it there for introductions. Can I just have a thumbs up if people can see my screen, which is being shared now? That's great. Thank you very much. We'll start the presentation and then we'll get cracking. So the first bit, hopefully we can just blast through. Please don't think for 1 second that we're going to spend a whole load of time on guidance, because we're not. But it is just to clarify a few bits of thinking on this one. My computer's going absolutely bananas, but hopefully that's worked okay. So to just clarify, as of this week, where we're up to in terms of music education and guidance for schools, and the caveat with this, because we've got 4 local authorities on the call, is just to say that please do take the local guidance from your local public health and your local service into account as well, even though I don't think I'm about to say anything that's too contentious. It's all linked to the national guidance documents. So this week, what can happen? I've underlined a couple of key phrases here. So all music teaching can take place. We are still receiving some questions from schools saying things like, well, can we sing? Can we sing in school now? And yes, it's a little bit too simplistic a question to just say, yes, you can sing. You do need to have mitigations in place as well. But singing and playing, including wind and brass, can all take place. Peripatetic teachers can visit school sites. They can move between bubbles. They can move between sites. Distancing is absolutely distancing right the way through to when restrictions are fully lifted.
John, sorry,
we're still on the first slide.
Oh, say again.
We're still on the first slide, John. They're not moving.
We're on what can happen as per 26.
No, we're on Secondary Music Network meeting, and we're on normal screen rather than slideshow. So we've got this slide deck on the left.
Oh, that's very odd. Let me just start that again.
All I can see is a black screen.
Yeah, me too. I can just see a black screen.
Sorry, folks. Teams is clearly not having a good day today. I turn this off slideshow. Let's try it that way. It won't look as nice this way, but let's see if this will work. How about that? People see that now?
Yep, I can see it.
Okay, so you won't get it in a nice presentation, but you'll at least be able to see the slides, I hope. So underline some key phrases there, which I hope you can see now. And if we just look at it's about the 5th bullet point about after school clubs. So that is one change from before the Easter break. So after school clubs can take place for all pupils now, and with outside providers as well. Obviously, the rule of 15 does apply. So for those of us who are now really familiar with all the different bits of guidance, the OOSH guidance is out of school hours. Multiples of 15 are mentioned, so that can be a little bit problematic if you're thinking of doing something which involves more than 15 children. But there are multiples of 15 that are okay. And we had a question in the primary network earlier this week about how about after school provision with children all in the same class bubble. Our understanding is that for children, class bubbles, the assumption there is that class bubbles are okay. After school, it's generally assumed that it'll be children that are coming from all across the school or even from different schools. And that's why 15 is in there as a maximum number. So if you had a class bubble that was continuing beyond the end of the school day, that would be okay with more than 15 children. So that's the differentiator there. Day visits can now happen, but a little challenge is to go and find a music activity that's going on somewhere that you could go to with a day visit. That's the first thing we'd say, but it's really helpful for thinking about things like going back to outdoor visits, outdoor centres, things like that. And we hope soon enough we'll have live music events back up and running for schools to come to again. What is still restricted? So live performance to live audience. We're not sure whether that will be possible post the 17th of May, but we very much hope so. There's a little bit of conflict between the DFE guidance and the out of school hours guidance, particularly around singing and wind and brass, because the DFE guidance says no activities in larger groups. What that's really driving at is things like assemblies or large ensembles after school that draw pupils from right across the school and would pop bubbles all over the place. So that's where the rule of 15 applies. Anything in a class should be okay within the same bubble. And obviously instrument sharing, it's good practice not to do that, and resource sharing, please don't if you can avoid it. And I've just put that there because, again, we've had staff meetings with our teams this week about close contact for visiting teachers. It's absolutely essential that there isn't close contact, that visiting teachers keep their distance at all times. But I'm sure you're well versed in this. It's just a reminder of what's changed. So not a lot has really changed. We've been talking to schools all year about mitigations. There's a list of mitigations here. They always help, no matter which ones you look at. And it's not as simple as box ticking, but the example I always use is if you think about singing. Singing with distancing is great. Singing with distancing where you're also thinking about volume and the choice of words in the songs and having the windows open is clearly better. So it's just useful to keep going back to that list of mitigations when you're approaching activity. That is completely all I want to say about current guidance, unless there are any specific questions. We had a couple from primary colleagues on Monday. Are there any questions or scenarios that people would like to explore at this point while you've got 4 heads of service on a call that could maybe try and answer it between us? I'll give a little pause and see if there are any. No. Great. Okay. Take that as all going well. I mean, I hope that many of you, as you've been saying all the year, you're hoping to get back in specialist classrooms again. That feels like one of the major hurdles, but I'm seeing some nodding. So that's either nodding that we want to get back or nodding that we are back, and I hope it's the latter. So model music curriculum. I'm really grateful, as you might be able to tell, I'm absolutely full of a cold and my voice isn't going to hold for very long. But the model music curriculum was published just before the Easter break. The timing was absolutely terrible. I think they tried to avoid April Fool's Day, but apart from that, which they managed to achieve, so we didn't get a big piece of music guidance on April Fool's Day, but it was very close to when we were all tired at the end of the spring term and just before the break. But we have this new thing called the model music curriculum, and Graham, who's on the call, sort of gave us this quote and bit of thinking around publication highlighting the importance of music, the imperative for schools to provide time and resource, the need for thinking about progression, pedagogy, and the knowledge that it will stimulate national debate. And it's certainly done that. Ruth Steele from Stoke is very kindly going to take us through this section on model music curriculum. So if you wouldn't mind, Ruth, I'll do my best to get these slides to follow what you're saying. Thanks, Ruth.
Thanks, John. So if we move on to the next slide, I think it's really important to note that the model music curriculum, it complements and sits alongside 2 other documents that we've got. So there's the statutory guidance, the national curriculum guidance. All of the links are in this slide here if you need them. It's really important, I think, to say that that national curriculum statutory guidance, it's still in place and it hasn't changed. I think there's been a little bit of confusion around that. It's got really broad statements, as we know, and I think for some of our non-specialist teachers, especially in primary education, that's been quite challenging. And I think the model curriculum perhaps puts some more detail in that some of our colleagues were looking for. It also sits alongside the National Plan for Music Education. That was written in 2011. It was due a refresh, autumn 2020, I think. We're still waiting for that and we don't know when that's going to be published. But when we have more information on that, I'll let you know. But it provides a practical framework for music. It's designed to assist rather than prescribe. I think that's in the forward. Look at the model music curriculum, and it's there to benchmark to ensure that every lesson is of the highest quality. The model music curriculum is there for you to use it if you want to. You can dip in and out of it, you can adapt it, and you can create your own progressive music curriculum. So feel free to use it or dip in and out of it as you need to. If we can move on to the aim, John. So the aim is to provide universal provision and to support all children to have that high quality music education. And it sets out minimum times for teaching right across from Key Stage 1 to Key Stage 3. So for Key Stage 1 and 2, a minimum of 1 hour teaching a week. It mentions the whole class instrumental programme, that mandatory term of whole class delivery in year 3 or 4, or definitely in Key Stage 2. And it stresses the importance for those people progress and develop from there. So what happens once those pupils have taken part in that whole class programme? Can they then move into small group or individual lessons to help them progress if they wish to do so? It talks about rhythmic and melodic instruments, so tuned and untuned instruments in Key Stage 1 and 2. And then for yourselves as secondary teachers, a minimum of 1 weekly period the whole way through Key Stage 3. And it does mention that carousels are not a substitute. So those timings, I think, have been welcomed by us, and hopefully for you as head teachers will take them on board. If we move on to the next slide, this is Ofsted's response following the publication, and they'll be looking at the way that the curriculum is implemented and the impact that it has within your school. They'll be expecting that schools have well-sequenced plans that at least match the ambition set out in the national curriculum, that your school gives sufficient time and resources to music, and that there's good teaching and a programme of CPD support for staff. We've got Graham on the call. Graham's a current Ofsted inspector. I know he's going to do an Ofsted update later, but if there's anything you want to add at this point, Graham, please do chip in.
Yeah, we had a question from a teacher on Monday about the hours provision, and hers was 45 minutes. Well, you know, and I know that you can have an hour's music lesson, which is an absolute disaster, and an hour's music lesson where children make a lot of progress. So really, I think that's the ideal, an hour. That's what it's suggesting. It's setting out a stall, and it's something that you can now use with senior leaders if they're talking, or if you've got carousels. It isn't statutory. So it's a standard. It's just a piece of ammunition in our armoury, really, as music teachers, to fight for continuing music throughout Key Stage 3 right to the end of Year 9. And you will have probably read about the research done, University of Sussex and so on, about the declining provision of music in Key Stage 3 and 4. And hopefully this will help to address that. Thank you. I'll say more about Ofsted later.
Thanks, Graham. If we could move on to the next slide, John. So this model music curriculum, it gives that clear progressive framework that you can follow. And I think it gives an insight into what children can achieve. It shows that journey right through from a child's first music lesson. Obviously, a child we would hope would start music lessons in the early years, but it starts at Year 1. It tells us what they should be expected to do in Year 6. And then it moves through that pathway for you from Year 7 right through to Year 9, that hopefully then can lead to further study at GCSE and A level. So it states that every young person should be able to experience music and make progress, that music enriches individual lives and also the school's wider community. It supports pupils in their musical progression. It offers that rich and varied framework. There's that expectation that music is for all, so it wants to include those children with SEND too. I think it's important to note that it was written without current COVID-19 restrictions, so there's no mention of that in the document, but we talked about mitigations earlier. It's got a very large repertoire bank at the end, lots of suggestions for you to use. If you look at the whole document, I've printed it off here. It's quite a lengthy. It's just over 100 pages there. The repertoire at the end is just suggestions. You don't have to use them, but feel free to have a look at them. There may be some repertoire that you've not discovered yet that you'd like to include in your curriculum. If you actually look at the Key Stage 3 section of the document, the information for Years 7 to 9, it is just 10 pages long. So don't be put off by the lengthy document. And I know John made an important point earlier in the week that if you have printed it off or you downloaded it when it first came out, it has been updated. So please go back to the website and check for updates. And like I said, the hyperlinks in the earlier slide that we showed you. So don't be put off by the repertoire, the glossary, the acknowledgements at the back. Use what's helpful. Ask us for support. If you need music specialism, then please come to your local music service and ask for it. We're here to help you. So how is it sequenced? It sets out learning in the following areas, and this runs right through from Key Stage 1 to Key Stage 3. Singing, listening, composing and performing, and progression runs all the way through it, and I think that's essential. John, can we just very quickly whiz on to the Key Stage 2 slide? So we've got 3 slides here. We presented this to primary colleagues earlier in the week, and we'll be doing so again next week. We've put these in for your information, but I think it's probably really important just to look at where they're suggesting pupils should be at the end of year 6. So one thing right through Key Stage 1 and 2 is singing. So singing's that key thread. But it does state that by the end of year 6, they would hopefully be expecting pupils to sing in 4-part rounds using dynamics, different time signatures and syncopated rhythms. So thinking about your transition, this is where they expect or would hope pupils to be by the time they get to year 6. They would like them to be composing given structures, improvising, using the voice, classroom percussion, and instruments that they may use within the whole class programme or within their peripatetic lessons. For noting, by the end of year 6, reading up to an octave in pitch, and then using quite a wide range of note values from semi-quavers to semi-breves and rests as well, which is very ambitious. It runs right through Key Stage 1 and 2 about pupils developing a love of music, and in quotes, doing music, so lots and lots of practical activities, and then a repetition of techniques and internalising skills, having the opportunity to perform and having the opportunity to hear live performances, as well as listening to that wide range of repertoire. John, if we could just scroll back then, sorry, to Key Stage 3. So what does the Key Stage 3 guidance tell us within the model music curriculum? It continues that journey from Key Stage 1 and 2 and builds on that learning that have had during their primary music experience. So it expects that all pupils have had that experience of performing, composing and listening, and they're able to read a simple melody when they get to you in year 7. It provides that route for them to be able to choose and succeed in further qualifications, including GCSE. So thinking about your pupils, we need to give them that opportunity and that pathway to be able to go on to study music further at Key Stage 5 and beyond that. A route to be able to play a part in the musical life of your school and your community, and to have that opportunity to explore music technology. And I'm sure lots of you use music technology within your lessons anyway. And then to create those pathways for pupils to develop as vocalists and instrumentalists, to develop that technical capability and to develop a good grounding in harmony. The next bullet point, the ability to sing in harmony. So this is building on that experience in the primary schools, and singing is a strength in most of our primary schools. It says that you should provide a regular opportunity to sing within your curriculum, and does state that if you leave the children singing for too long, without singing for too long, that pupils will lose their confidence. So get them singing as soon as they come into you in year 7. It talks about warm-ups, breathing, posture and vocal health, about observing phrasing and accurate pitching, and talking about appropriate styles within singing. It suggests that you're exploring 3- and 4-part rounds in year 7, and by the time the pupils get to year 9, they are singing in 3-part harmony. And it gives you some repertoire suggestions in terms of singing. But again, there are lots of great singing resources out there. They are just suggestions. And going forwards, if you do need some support in terms of CPD, within, how can we help our pupils to sing? How can we choose suitable repertoire? Then do get in touch, because we can provide some CPD going forwards. In terms of listening, gaining that oral knowledge and listening as both a technical exercise and an opportunity to explore musical meaning and purpose. Again, there are lots of repertoire suggestions. Please do have a look at those, but don't feel that you do have to use them. And then there's a list of questions in there as well, so that when pupils are listening to a piece of music, there are some suggested questions that you could use. In terms of composing and improvising, engaging with that creative process through both improvisation and composition, building an understanding of how musical elements work and discussing how these interact, and developing a knowledge of wider range of notes and improving their fluency in musical notation. And within the model music curriculum 7, 8 and year 9, there are examples given for songwriting, programme music, melody and accompaniment and improvising. So do have a look at those examples and use them and adapt them as you need to. In terms of instrumental performance, I'm finding the slides quite difficult to read because they're quite small, but we will send these out afterwards. So developing that reliable music memory, forming and using primary chords, instrumental performance for whole class and small group ensembles, having that proficiency on an instrument or using music technology. And it says that it's desirable for most pupils to have some degree of proficiency on a keyboard. Within the curriculum for year 7 and year 9, it does give examples for some keyboard work and for a class brass band running right through from year 7 to year 9. And again, they're just examples that you can use or you can adapt to your current situation and the instruments that you use within your curriculum teaching in school. It also talks about classroom instrumental ensembles, that they would have that gateway, I think, to, you know, life as an enjoyable music activity, giving the pupils that opportunity to perform and not just having that opportunity to perform as a whole ensemble, but also to have those opportunities as small group ensembles and then maybe as a school orchestra or as an ensemble with a mix of year groups. It gives information as well about progression through ensembles. So it talks about the sense of the ensemble, technical competence, interpretation and performance qualities. And in terms of staff notation, it does give examples of sequences of learning and there's a table in there to show at what year group you might be wanting to teach semiquavers and dotted notes. Again, it's just an example, but do have a look at it, it is in there. The other thing that's in there is an example of a year 6, year 7 transition project. And I think it's really key throughout this curriculum that the progression is there between Key Stage 2 and Key Stage 3. And it gives an example of a melodic performance and a composition project that you could consider, and also a class singing session. Giving the opportunity for year 6 pupils to demonstrate what they've learned and stressing that the end of year 6 should be very similar to the start of year 7 when they come to you. So if we could move over to the considerations, John. So just some questions for you to think about and take back to school and talk to SLT in school about. How is curriculum music delivered in your school? How can all children that wish to access instrumental and vocal lessons? How well is music delivered across the key stages? Pose as well between Key Stage 2 and when they come into you in Key Stage 3. What conversations do you have with primary leads in your primary schools? Is the entire offer ambitious, well sequenced and implemented well? What time and resources are given to music in your school? What does progress and progression look like? And who do you need to go to ask for further support and guidance? Well, we're here to support you. So if we can do anything to help them, please do get in touch with your local music service. So how can we help you? If we move on to the next slide, John. And I would imagine for those Dudley teachers here, some of these offers will be the same for the schools in Staffordshire, Stoke-on-Trent and Telford, and Dudley schools, please do get in touch with Chris and I'm sure he'll talk you through what the offer is within Dudley. So we're delighted that we were received cultural recovery funding for the summer term. John, do you just want to chip in and talk about that at this point?
Yeah, thanks, Ruth. I will do. Again, this little bit isn't for Dudley schools, but having spoken to Chris, I still think he would like you to take away my key message on this one, which is basically get in touch with an exclamation mark. So if you've got a group of children who just want to get started and you can't think of a way to make it happen, whether that's financially or that usual group of 5 children that's become a group of 3 children, we're just all interested in making sure the 3 children continue, they don't lose out because 2 have dropped away for whatever reason over the past few months. And that really formed the basis of our cultural recovery bid for Staffstoke and Telford, and we were delighted that we had a part award back from the DCMS on that one. What it doesn't mean that there aren't other pots of funding available right across the West Midlands to help support schools and individuals, though. So if you are a school from Dudley, then as Ruth said, do get in touch with Chris on that one. But yeah, is that enough, Ruth?
Thanks, John. So there's a list of what we can do to support you here as the Music Partnership. So, as John said, summer term recovery. We have our subsidised whole class teaching within our primary schools, subsidised progression teaching. We have a fully funded transition and open evening support office. So if we can do anything to help you with transition between year 6 and year 7, please do get in touch. We are aware that will look slightly differently this year because of COVID. Our In Harmony programme runs in 2 schools in Telford and Wrekin and a school in Stoke-on-Trent. Our music share workshops that I'm sure lots of you will have already taken part in, and our Create with Camerata workshops and performances. We provide subsidised charanga licences. We have funded lessons for looked after children, and we now also have a bursary support scheme for individual families who are struggling to afford music lessons for their children. Please do look at the FOSIM website if you're interested in that. We also have our concerts and events when restrictions allow us to resume them. So our annual Recorder Festival, Play with the Halle Orchestra, Music Share, Create with Camerata, and a huge range of events right through the year. So please do look out for emails and look for those offers within the Hub newsletter, which comes out once a term. And then in terms of CPD and support, we have our progression maps, one for Key Stage 1 and 2 and one for Key Stage 3. And I know Graham's going to come on to progression in a moment. If you haven't seen those, then please do ask for those. We can send those out. We have our assessing musical progress document for instrumental and vocal work. And again, if you'd like to see a copy of that, we can send that out to you. Please do get in touch. We also have a guide for senior leaders, what a good lesson looks like, what a good one looks like, our WAGOL document. And again, if you haven't seen a copy of that, again, we can send it out. We run our fully funded network meetings, and we're going to be putting in place further support for you in terms of training going forwards. There are fully funded support visits for you as music leads within schools, or if you prefer it to do it on Teams at the moment, then we can set those up for you. A fully funded annual music summit that unfortunately we won't be running this year, but we hope to run that again next year. We have our music audits. So we can audit your music provision with you in school. You can celebrate your successes and look for some areas for development. And then from them, you have the opportunity to access our Excellence in Music Provision Awards right through from copper to platinum. And I know lots of you have already taken part in the process. We have a a subsidised early years conference, and the details are there if any of you would like to advertise that to some of the primary schools that you work with. And then part of the audit process, we have fully funded membership of Music Mark, the National Association for Music Education. And for any of you that use charanga, we have 3 charanga sessions coming up, an introduction to charanga, a music and autism session and a composing session. So what we'll be doing following the network meetings and over the next couple of weeks is we'll be putting out a hub-wide survey. Please do let us know what CPD requirements you need going forward. So whether that's training, like I said, about singing, or whether you need some training within progression in Key Stage 3, then please do complete that survey, and we'll be putting further sessions on going forwards. If you've got any, please do pop them in the chat, but I'm going to hand over to Graham, who's going to talk about Ofsted and progression. Thanks, Graham.
Okay, thanks, Ruth. Just to add one or two things to what Ruth said. Ruth mentioned the progression maps, which we produced about a year or so ago, and these are probably of comparable quality to what we see in the music model curriculum. So a question came to us on Monday from a primary specialist saying, well, are you going to change those? Well, no, because we aren't obliged to follow the exact pattern of the model music curriculum, but we believe our progression maps offer also a plan for an ambitious curriculum. But it's really important that you as teachers, you know what the progression is which you are following. I think this is a particular problem in primary schools who will say, oh, well, we're using Charanga or we're using Music Express, but without really knowing what it is that the milestones are until they get to them, perhaps in the scheme. So I think it's important that you have your own progression map, and it's appropriate to your school, to the context of your school, to the local needs, the cultural needs of the children that you know so well. So that's the one thing. The other thing that Ruth referred to was this WAGOL document, what a good one looks like. And it was a suggestion of a secondary head teacher that we started on this, and I worked with a group of heads of music on this as guidance for senior leaders and teachers. We just got it finished, and then of course lockdown came, and we thought, well, we can't start sending this out because a lot of schools will just say, well, we can't be dealing with that now. So we have held on to that, and we are going to return to it. And I think it was a secondary document, and I think we're going to also develop a primary document. But, you've come to me, some of you, saying, my senior leadership team is telling me I've got to do this. It doesn't fit the way in which music should be developing in the school. And whatever help and support we can give you, we will. And that WAGOL document was making some very significant points. Just for example, as the model music curriculum is advising against carousels, well, we're saying much the same thing in that. So it's a case of watch this space as far as the WAGOL document is concerned. Now, this is the point where you probably turn your microphones off and scream, because next slide, please. I want to just tell you about Ofsted and their plans. Inspections have been going on over the past 2 terms, but they've been more like kind of supportive critical friend visits, finding out information about how schools are managing the pandemic, how they're providing for remote learning, how they're continuing to safeguard the children who aren't at school, and how they're going to plan to develop the curriculum in a way that enables lost learning to be made up. It was only this morning, actually, that I was working with some trainee teachers in Telford who said, well, our school were too bothered about catching up with English and maths. And I said, well, don't forget that music can support mental health and can be a very important part of the curriculum now in schools where children are returning, having had some difficult months, a difficult year. So it is important that we maintain music in our schools right across the board, Key Stage 1 to 3. And I'm sure you're all thinking, well, how are primary schools going to get the children to that standard at the end of year 6? Well, we're giving them as much support as we can for you to be able to continue the good work with them. But as far as Ofsted is concerned, there's going to be more formal inspections beginning in schools this term, and is going to start with those schools who were previously requires improvement, unsatisfactory or special measures. So the 3s and 4s of this world will get their monitoring inspections this term, later in the term. You'll notice in the last bullet point there that secondary schools won't be inspected until the second half of the summer term. And that's going to kick in then with monitoring inspections of schools that had weaknesses. And they won't be full inspections, and they won't be graded unless there is a significant change. So if you've been in a special measures school or a serious weaknesses school, you will know that a couple of HMI or an HMI inspector will come in and just have a look and write a letter to the head teacher afterwards and say you're making the right progress to be, out of that category soon, but not actually moving the school. That's probably going to be most of the inspections this term. There was something in the media about schools where pupils have made formal complaints about safeguarding issues being looked at as well. I haven't heard anything from Ofsted about how they're going to work on that one. I've only had information about the monitoring inspections. And also, there will be inspections of schools who haven't had an inspection for over 5 years, who are in the good and outstanding categories. They will be short inspections, probably just 1 day. And with outstanding schools, it will be on the request of the school. So if you're in an outstanding school and your head says, oh, Ofsted are coming tomorrow, you will know for certain that the head has asked for it. But that's where we are with that. And in the autumn term, the plan is, if things don't change again, the plan is the full programme of graded inspections will return. I'll be able to tell you more after May the 21st because I've been called for 2 days Ofsted training then, and I've been offered 3 inspections after half term. So I shall have a bit more sort of on the ground advice and guidance to give you. Now, the inspection handbook has been revised slightly to take into account the impact of COVID-19. So in addition to what inspectors would normally be looking for, they'll be looking at how well schools have integrated remote education into the curriculum and how well they're making up for gaps in pupils' knowledge because of the impact. But we are still looking for, or they are still looking for, an ambitious curriculum helping pupils to study the full breadth of subjects. And if that's not the case, there needs to be a good reason for it, and inspectors will need to see that leaders are working about returning to that full range of subjects in the very near future. Before the pandemic and when the deep dive inspection started and there was a much greater focus on curriculum and progression, it was said that Ofsted would understand if schools hadn't completed their journeys, as it were, and it's still the case. It seems that although in time periods it would have lapsed now and it would be expected that schools had got everything in order, it's still, because of the pandemic, being considered that there may be schools that are still in transition with its curriculum, with their curriculums, and inspectors will take account of this. I do hope, and I will certainly be working on this, do hope that inspectors will go in with a supportive view, understanding the difficulties and stresses that schools have been under over the past few months. Certainly that is the message that's come from schools who have had inspections, visits in the last few months, that inspectors have been adopting that kind of supportive approach. I hope that will continue, but I'm not in charge. And I know that the Chief Inspector is under great pressure from the Parliamentary Education Committee to be more rigorous with the inspections, particularly as I said at previous meetings when we were looking at some of the Ofsted reviews of education during the pandemic, it is coming out that obviously a lot of learning has been lost, and how is that going to be made up? So there is pressure on Ofsted to get their teeth into things again, and that's what the plan is at the moment anyway. I feel like Chris Whitty here. Next slide, please. Okay. There is going to be a series of research reviews published from April 2021. Well, they've got tomorrow to publish the first one for subjects and setting out the most helpful ways of securing progression. So this word progression is coming up large in the Ofsted agenda, isn't it? Progression in each subject. And so guiding principles are going to be produced. Now, you will know, I expect, that we now have a music specialist, particularly in charge of music. He's been a senior inspector in London for years, Mark Phillips. He's been now given the music brief back, and he's writing some very helpful stuff. And you may see him on Twitter and in other media outlets. And he is welcoming the model music curriculum and recognises its part to play in supporting music in the curriculum. I mean, I spoke to Mark a few years ago and he was very depressed about the state of music in the curriculum. And I'm sure he'll want to help teachers to do something about it by writing materials, but we're not sure when and whether a music review document is going to come out. I'm sure it won't be the first one to be released, but at some time down the line, we may get some more guidance on music, the best way of securing progression in music. So next slide, please. There is Ofsted's notes on what these subject reviews will look like. And again, it's progress in the subject, the goals of the subject, assessment, high expectations, and the quality of systems around subject teaching support for subject-specific staff development. Probably quite an important issue for primary schools in particular. And the next to last bullet point is interesting because actually about 10 years ago, Mark wrote a document, Guidance for Senior Leaders, on assessing music in schools. I've been pushing it and peddling it and giving it out to people who I've seen. Unfortunately, Ofsted now considers it out of date, but that bit is still there, that school policies should not impede effective subject education. So if the school policy is that everybody reads a non-fiction text regularly, that isn't appropriate necessarily in music, certainly not on a regular basis. But some school policies are saying that. And Ofsted has now got the idea that some schools are putting the cart before the horse. The policy is more important than its impact in the subject. So I do think there's going to be some things in these documents which will be helpful. And certainly we've got some of those points in our WAGOL document. And I know that the National Music Association is also considering releasing some further guidance to leaders, which will have the same points in them. So again, watch this space and let's hope it's all supportive. Okay, let's go on then. Just a reminder that there are 3 strands of progression in music. Increasing the range and the breadth is one thing, but the challenge and the quality are 2 important features. And I always say that quality is more important than difficulty. So if you've got children singing a song with too wide a range, the words, they can't articulate them well enough, quickly enough, or the composition is based on some kind of complex formula which doesn't result in quality music, it just relates in complex notes on a page or on a recording, then that's something to think about. Making sure that although the challenge will steadily increase, that the quality of music is maintained. As one teacher said to me this morning, the trainees I was working with, he said, our music lessons were dire. I was bored, I was fed up. I didn't feel engaged with them at all when I was at school. That will be 15 years ago, I guess. And that's important that children are motivated, and they'll only be motivated if they're immersed in quality musical experiences. If what they compose really makes sense and is personal to them and isn't just following a series of complex rules like some of us had to do when we wrote our 4-part harmony in the school hall for our A-level exams, you know. We didn't know what it sounded like until we went to the piano to try it out afterwards. So, you know, emphasis on quality, make sure the quality is there. And finally, my final slide for now, John, thanks. You know, you can have very simple musical ideas all strung together in a line as you might in Key Stage 1. You develop, you integrate the elements, the interrelated dimensions as we now call them, and you create a piece of music which draws on a lot of devices and stylistic features, and it makes a nice balanced piece of music. John has experience of not so nice balanced pieces of flower arranging, I understand from his past. I couldn't find a Duff flower arrangement on the internet, so I put a nice one on to say, you know, you've got a lot of elements all interacting together, but it's got to make something that is pleasing, not something which is basically not musical. So that's where I see progression. The 3 strands, but making sure the quality strand is highlighted and featured in your teaching and learning. Okay, I've spoken for long enough. I know Rachel wants to talk about exams.
Thanks, Graham. That's really helpful. For anyone that's intrigued by that, I managed a day's work in a flower shop before I went to university. So if anyone would like to see a poor flower arrangement, I'm sure I'll have a photo somewhere. Look, I just wanted to tie those two things together before Rachel talks about exams to say, after what feels like about 8 years of dearth, where we've had very little in terms of guidance, I think the last major Ofsted report on music was 2013, with a few words in 15. All of a sudden, we're getting all of these publications, and the model music curriculum, I feel that there's been a bit of an own goal that's been scored around lots of academics that have been debating choice of repertoire and finding it terribly important to say, well, this piece is better than that piece, and kind of misses the point that there's 4 very strong bullet points in the start of the model music curriculum about time for music in school, and it's long overdue, having been said, really. So I feel really excited by that. We're very much on Mark 1 still of National Plan for Music Education, but we hope Mark 2 will be with us by 2021. And again, we'll be in touch as soon as we have anything on National Plan for Music Education. But it feels a good time. So if you're if all of a sudden you've been felt like you were talking to SLT and very much on your own peddling the value of music, all of a sudden there are some documents that are starting to back that, which I hope is helpful. So thanks to Graham and thanks to Ruth as well. My voice is not holding out particularly well. So Rachel, could you jump in and talk about exams, please?
I can. Thanks, John, and thanks, Graham. I think I could produce a bad flower arrangement as well, but I do have a girl guiding badge in it. Who knew that we used to do those back in the day of flower arranging? So I'm sure you're all kind of drowning like we are in exam talk and CAGs and tags, new words that are being thrown every day at you. We even had a 40-minute inset last night on unconscious bias, which we'd never really heard of until last night, to be honest. But I actually went to an Edexcel Pearson meeting on Monday, a webinar, and it was really interesting and really useful. So I just want to remind everyone really that we've got to produce the grade as a holistic grade. So using the JCQ guidance, really. I'm sure you've all seen that. I'm sure your exam boards and exam officers have sent it to you. I've tried to drop it into the chat, John, but I can't. The chat says it's disabled. I don't know if that's just for me.
I don't know what's going on with Teams, Rach. It's something's not working properly. Yeah. So yeah.
But it's quite easy to find. And the idea is that you arrive at a grade, you consider what's been taught and collect the evidence, evaluate it, establish whether it's appropriate, and then assign that grade. To me, I kind of still need a spreadsheet to get there, if that makes sense to anyone. And that's the way that we are doing it. We're using the 2019 grade boundaries, and that seems the way that a lot of people are doing it based on the Facebook pages as well. Some schools seem to have been told they can't use the 2021s. Obviously, there's only one for the listening component, but it seems very, very different. What I took from that meeting on Monday was the fact really that obviously we do need to do the 3 assessment objectives, whereas we maybe didn't need to do that last year, and you need to have that hard evidence. They sent a document out, or a document was published last Friday, that said that they were going to request 2 subjects from schools for quality assurance. One will obviously be maths, English or science, and it could be any subjects. It's probably doubtful it's going to be music, but you just never know. So it's just making sure you've got that evidence. And if you haven't got evidence for a child, then I thought this was really interesting on Monday, that you've got alternatives to like the performance and composition as well. And they basically said that you can still achieve this even if they've not fully complied with the requirements. So you can use conversations you've got from teams, evidence of recordings or part recordings, conversations with teachers, and that was both for, obviously, well, it's be for all 3 components really. So I just found that really interesting. That might actually help one of our students. It won't help another one who doesn't go to a piano lesson ever, but actually it might help one of our students. And I think the main difference for me is from last year is the assessment is based on what is presented. It's not this predicted outcome that we could have last year, or a judgment of the student's potential. I'm sure you're all kind of up to your eyeballs in exam stuff at the moment, and I'm looking forward to getting back to normal exams. But if you need anything, then please ask, because we can support you. We can listen to a piece for you, listen to a composition. We did it. I'm lucky that there's 3 of us. We did it as a department last night and basically marked the compositions. But yeah, please shout out if you need any help, or you just want to make sure your evidence is enough, because every school's different. And that's probably about it from me.
I put something on the Facebook page, which is an OCR webinar on a roundtable discussion, which is appropriate to all the boards in that it follows a JCQ guidance. But I thought that was quite interesting, some of the things that were being said on there. So there are all sorts of bits and pieces, and probably OCR teachers got it from the OCR chat rooms anyway, but I just put it there just in case.
Thanks.
So there's lots of guidance out there coming out.
Yeah. I think it's the speed of it now as well, that ours has got to be in the next 3 weeks. And you kind of think you've got tons of time, and we've actually had to plan it out week by week. So at the school that we share our sixth form with, they've had assessment week. So ours did a full exam last week, but at our place, we're doing mini assessments every kind of lesson, really. It swings and roundabouts, isn't it? It's good in some ways for them, but some of them might have 5 assessments in one day. So it's harsh. I don't know what the best approach is, really. So yeah, any questions about exams? Anyone got anything they'd like to say or share? Anyone got any concerns? Then please just ask us.
Yeah, look, thanks, Rachel. Look, I think we'll have there's sort of two bits here because we've got 2 minutes left. So we'll just leave the recording on for a second. If there are any key questions that come back, we've covered an awful lot of content now, and I hope for Dudley Schools you found that part of the meeting at least has been helpful for you. And apologies that there have been a little bit of local phraseology for staff Stoke and Telford, but I know Chris's offer is very, very similar. It's just things might be called something slightly different. But if there are any questions, please ask them. I'll then turn off the recording and we'll hang around for a few minutes, just as we would at the end of a normal network, back where we could have conference halls with biscuits and things like that. So if people want to hang around and ask something they would rather not do so to the full group, then please feel free. Are there any questions while we're still recording? Is anyone still alive out there? That's the next question. No, a joke. That's fine. Chris, is there anything you'd like to add, just from a Dudley perspective? Sorry to put you on the spot, but
you always do this, John. Thanks for that. No, not really. I mean, we found out about this meeting yesterday from John, and really thank you for extending the invite to us. It came down very late notice. It's been really useful for us. We've been looking at how we're going to disseminate information about music model curriculum and other issues, so it just made perfect sense to jump onto this, and it's great. More than happy to have conversations about anything that's come up today. Likewise with John, we're launching things to do with recovery curriculum and offers for next year, using subsidies, all that sort of stuff, which we're coming out to you in the next few days. So yeah, just get in touch if there's something you want to talk about, and if you think it would be useful to reform any networks in Dudley, just be in touch and we can move those things forward.
Thanks, Chris. That's brilliant. Right, I'm going to stop recording, so we'll get a little notice